What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
So let's get things started. Today is December 15th, 2021. We want to say to everyone, welcome to Every Other Wednesday. As you know, normally there are 4 hosts, but 2 of our esteemed hosts, that is Jeff Tobe and Michael Kerr, were unable to attend today. They are doing crazy things like changing the world and helping other people. So we, Richard Haddon and I, are here, but we're really excited that we have a guest. But before we introduce the guest, we'll get Richard to say where he's from and hello. Go ahead, Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Haddon, and I live in Jacksonville, Florida, but I'm not there right now. I'm in a secret, undisclosed location because I'm going to be changing the world tomorrow, but I arrived here today. So anyway, good to be here, and I'll apologize in advance. I'm in a place that they haven't yet got all the cables run for internet service, and so it's not very good. But I'm the author of Contented Cows Still Give Better Milk, and I talk about employee engagement and leadership, and now a lot about recruiting, retention, and onboarding.
Woo! And by the way, just earlier when we were doing a tech rehearsal, initially Richard came to the call with a styrofoam cup and a string.
Yeah,
thought that wasn't going to do. So there we go. My name is Sanjay Nath, and I am based in Oakville, Ontario, just outside of Toronto. And I am a specialist on leadership and performance. I should also tell you too that Beverly, our guest that I will introduce very shortly, she actually said, so it's really good that Michael and Jeff are not here because Beverly only agreed to come on the show because they weren't here. And we've aptly named the show Beauty and the Beasts.
There you go.
So there we go. Let me give Beverly a formal introduction. For 20 years, Beverly has used her SOS principle with teams who want to control their reaction to stress, build resiliency against life's challenges, and live fulfilling lives. Beverly works with teams and leaders to shift from stressed out to resilient, enabling them to be more engaged, productive, and healthy. On a personal note, I've known Beverly for over 20 years. I was saying that my youngest son has, on more than one occasion, driven tractors at her house. So I'm going to just throw the floor to Beverly to say hello and a welcome. So Beverly.
Hello, everybody. So I am Beverly, and I live in a place called Little Britain, Ontario, which is about 90 minutes northeast of Toronto. I live out in the middle of absolutely nowhere. So when it rains, my internet gets all kind of freaky, which is may or may not happen today. So fingers crossed, all goes good.
Excellent. So with that said, before the internet goes out, because worst case scenario, your internet kicks out and Richard's kicks out, and the audience is stuck with me, and that's not good for anyone. So insert joke here. And that's actually a really good thing because it'll be much more difficult for Richard to insult me because of the internet lag. So by the time he's actually throwing in the insult, I'll be on to the next topic. So this is fantastic.
I'll find a way. I'll find a way.
I believe in you. So Beverly, you are a resilience expert. Let's start with why. How'd you get into this? What's your journey to this?
Like most, it was a roundabout journey. So I took psychology and sociology in university, had no idea what I wanted to do. Through a couple of kind of turns of events, ended up presenting and working with the Canadian Mental Health Association. And from there, focusing really in on the mental illness side of things. So everything from schizophrenia to suicide awareness. And launched my own business during that time around stress. And so it grew across the country. And that's now what I focus in on, is helping people to build their resiliency and find ways of as leaders, helping their teams manage their stress.
Okay, so.
Well, I would think you would be having a bumper season at this point right now.
Well, I do say the one good thing that has happened from the pandemic is that it has accelerated mental health conversations in our workplace by at least 5 years. We had all of these.
I believe that.
We had all kinds of campaigns and stuff before around mental health awareness, but really getting it deep down into the level of teams having those conversations amongst each other and leaders feeling more comfortable with that. Certainly the pandemic has helped that immensely.
So has anything really changed? I mean, as a result of the pandemic? And what I mean by that is we have a different form of it right now, right? We call it COVID-19, and this has caused stress, and whether it's home stress or work stress or physical stress or whatever it is. But prior to COVID-19, there were there's always a different form of it. So has anything really changed?
I think what happened during the pandemic was different than before because so many things came together at the same time for the average person, which, and I mean by, average, just so many different things, working from home and having to adjust to that, and new technology, and difficulties with not being able to use some of their supports and not being able to use some of their natural coping strategies that maybe they would have used before, like reaching out and getting together with family or friends, or playing hockey, or going to the mall, whatever it was. A lot of those things all came together. So the sources and the strategies really collided to make it so that we were much more aware of in some cases, the fragility. Is fragility a word? Sanjay, help me out. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
How fragile our mental health. Fragileness. Yeah, whatever the word is, we think sometimes that we are bulletproof, that, I can handle all of these things, but when they come together in a certain way and take away some of our strategies, we can all be impacted by mental health issues.
And Beverly, is this something of an issue as well, that in many situations, if I'm going through a stressful time, there are others around me who are not necessarily having that same stimulus, and I can lean on them. But in this situation, everyone was in the same boat. And I couldn't lean on this person because they were having as hard a time, if not worse than I was. I mean, is that a thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And we learn coping strategies from the people around us. And so we were all going through this very new situation and didn't really have a context of how to cope with it. So we couldn't ask our neighbor, we couldn't ask our parent, or we couldn't ask our colleague what to do next, or how did they manage in a similar situation. And so we were really trying to find our way together.
Okay. A quick little logistical note. If you guys have specific questions for Beverly, feel free to throw them in the chat box and we'll get them to her. Question around.
Sanjay and I have got very little to add here. Yeah, we want to hear from Beverly and from you.
Exactly. We got nothing to say here. But with regards to mental health, the evolution of it. So, 20 years ago, if you had a mental health episode, or you are, getting coaching or counseling, it was a big stigmatism. It was like, oh my goodness, you're a less of a being. And now all of a sudden, it's a sign of empowerment. So talk to us about the evolution of that, and what are some of the catalysts for it?
Oh,
do you believe that it has evolved to that degree?
Yeah, so I do think it has evolved because we are a bit more aware. Are we aware to the point where we need to be? Probably not yet, because one of the presentations that I do is helping leaders to have supportive mental health conversations, because we haven't been trained in that aspect of it.
Right.
And
yeah.
so we have a bit of an awareness around what is depression or what is an anxiety disorder, a little bit if you've taken some of that, but how to have the conversation is much different. It's funny, when I worked with the Canadian Mental Health Association out of Toronto, I would do a 7-hour presentation on understanding mental illness. And it was for frontline workers, hostile, workers, anybody who is working with those who are marginalized or dealing with severe mental illnesses. And that course was longer than what most general practitioners received in training.
Yeah.
And so, that's the difference now, is that people are a little bit more aware. They've probably seen something on depression. They may not know all of the kind of what the treatment options are, but they know at least a little bit about how to identify the symptoms. But I'm seeing now where we're, especially because of COVID, how to have those conversations. Like, how do you approach them? Can I make it worse? What do I need to be aware of? What if I ask, what if I think that person is considering suicide? What if I say the wrong things? Will that push them over the edge, or whatever that edge looks like? And so we have these conversations with leaders to help them to feel comfortable. I have a document, and for all of you that are online and want this, it's part of my LinkedIn profile. So if you go to LinkedIn and Beverly Beuermann King, I do have a document that I posted there on what not to say. And it gives you kind of the what not to say and what to say, so that people can have these conversation starters or comments in their back pocket, so they don't feel like, oh, I'm tongue-tied, I don't know what to do next.
Wow. Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit, Beverly, about what we might recognize in the workplace as depression, as anxiety disorder? What's the difference between depression and anxiety disorder? Are they related? Are they completely separate? What might we look for? That kind of thing.
Ooh, that's a big question. So they are separate. But you can have both. There's nothing that precludes you from having both. So depression, it would be things like not being able to get up off the couch, having trouble making decisions, withdrawing, suicidal thoughts, those types of things, not being able to have energy. So you might sleep 15, 16 hours and wake up still not feeling rested. So those types of things. Whereas anxiety, it's heart pounding, it's not being able to relax, it's feeling agitated, it's not being able to focus, it's worry. And anxiety disorder. So depression is a type of mood disorder. Anxiety disorders have types within it. So obsessive compulsive disorder, phobias, panic disorders, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is one of the things that we're really talking about now, post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic stress injury. So there's differences, but interestingly, some of the treatment options are similar. The traditional treatment options for depression are antidepressant medications. For anxiety or anti-anxiety medications, which are addictive, and the antidepressant medications are not. So there's some mixes in there. People go, well, I don't want any of that medication stuff because it's addictive, and it's not. And there's different kinds and different categories and lots of things we could talk about, but it's really about getting the right information and the right treatments for the illness that you're dealing with.
In your view, how effective is talk therapy? With a trained counselor?
I'm going to use depression as an example. So medications for depression are around 70 to 80% effective for most types of depression. Talk therapy on its own, whether it's through a counselor or a therapist or a psychotherapist, is about 70 to 80% effective. And so some people are going, well, why would I do one over the other? The important point is, if you're taking medication, you should still be looking at some sort of counseling, because the two of them together, it decreases the risk of reoccurrence by about half. So it is significant. So I look at one as the medications deal with the chemicals that are not, the neurotransmitters that are not working right, either in the uptake of the neurotransmitter or in the way that it disperses it. But the counseling side helps you to manage the stress, and stress can, it taxes the way that those things work. And so you want to make sure that you're finding strategies to be able to deal with the stress, as well as helping the chemical reactions as well.
What about physical exercise, and how does that play into this? Because it's something that everyone can do, whether it's going for a walk. Now, just because they can do it doesn't always mean that they have the desire or that they will do it. But how does that tie into everything?
So what I say is that I'm going to go back again for depression. There are many ways of treating depression, and it really is unique to the person, and it really is based on the severity of the illness for them. So for some people, going for a walk, again, under stress management, is enough to regulate how the serotonin is used inside the brain. And for some people, that is enough. For other people, they could walk, 20 miles a day, every day of the week, and that's not going to help them. And so things like yoga is great for relaxation. For some people, it works wonders. And what drives me crazy is when somebody writes a book and says, everybody should do yoga because that's going to, get rid of your depression. Well, it worked for you, but doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for the next person.
By the way, I want to say thank you for giving an American example, walking 20 miles. For the Canadians, that's 32 kilometers. All right.
Right. I'll tell you what, we have a couple of comments in the chat. Let me just bring them up if I can, Beverly. So Connie says, in the 80s, lots of people were getting counseling, taking meds for depression, etc. However, in the 90s and ever since, it became no longer accepted. It's like, everybody is codependent or depressed. It's all in your head. Now we talk about it, but I'm not seeing that many people getting help. That's a lot to unpack there. But how do you respond to that?
So it is all in your head because it's your brain that's not working the way that it's supposed to. So that's it is, but it's not it's not an imagination. It is something that's not working the way it's supposed to. What we do know
is physiological, just in the same way that a broken arm is it not?
Yeah, in the same way that your heart doesn't necessarily work the way that it's supposed to, or your kidneys or whatever, it's an organ in your brain that can fail to work the way that it's supposed to. What we do know is that only one out of every 3 people seeks any sort of help for depression, which leaves 2/3 of the people still experiencing all of the same symptoms, but not reaching out for help either because of guilt or stigma, shame.
Can I clarify?
Yep.
You said 1 in 3, that's 1 in 3 who are depressed, or 1 in 3 in the general population?
So 10% of the population will experience depression at some point in their lifetime. So I'm going to use a Canadian example. If we have 30-ish million, then we're going to have about 3 million Canadians who are going to experience depression. Only 1 out of that 3 million will reach out for help.
I see.
3 of that 3 million. Got it.
Yeah.
So whether it's guilt, shame, another example is that people just don't know where to go. Like, for some people, like they feel like this is who I am, this is what I deserve, or this is what it's like to be me. But for other people, even when they recognize what it is, where do you go for help? Sanjay lives in the greater Toronto area. So if you live on one side of Yonge Street, but north of another street, you can only access these certain agencies. But if you're under this age, or you also have an alcohol problem, you can't access that one. But if you live north of Kapuskasing, which is in northern part of Ontario, it may take you 3 hours just to get to a general practitioner, a doctor, let alone for somebody who specializes in mental health issues. So I know those are Canadian examples, but it's around the world in the same way.
And of course, in the United States, not everyone's healthcare covers mental illness. Certainly not to the same degree that it might cover other illnesses. And so that's always depending on the quality of your insurance.
Yeah, there's a real stigma around that and a real separation and difference, So we need to get past that it is, again, like an organ in any part of your body that fails to respond or deal with it. The problem is that it changes everything. It changes your mood, it changes your motivation, it changes your perceptions. And then because we can't relate to the person on that level, it's hard. If somebody has a broken arm, you can relate to the pain that they're experiencing, from the broken arm, but other things we can't.
Well, and of course it has such an impact at work because, so with a broken arm, so you can only type with one hand, or we would make accommodations for you for that. But if it's a mental illness, it's a different, some managers, some leaders, some organizations, some cultures, I would think, would be much more accommodating, and others would not be.
Yeah. And how do you make some of those accommodations? And one of the things we know with medications is for some people, they have a much harder time if they're dealing with depression first thing in the morning. So an accommodation might be allowing that person to start at 10 or 11 o'clock and work later. Other people have a much harder time in the middle of the afternoon. And so it might be allowing them to work in the morning and then work in the evening, but taking some time off in the afternoon. It really is about the individual because it is so completely different. I look at medications in the same way I do a garden hose. And so for many of you, you have a garden hose and you go to water your flowers and you can turn the nozzle on the garden hose to make it spray the entire garden or just a particular plant. And where we are with the medications is they used to be more like the wide spray, and it would hit everything in the brain, and it had all kinds of side effects, and it was difficult to function. We're now tuning that up, but the problem is we tune it up too much. We may be actually missing some of the symptoms that is, so the person may be taking medication and they're not feeling any better. And in some cases, they may actually feel worse. So it can take an incredibly long time to find the right category of medications at the right dosage that's going to work for that particular person.
All a matter of fine tuning. So here's the thing is, because this is so individualized, like you're saying, two people suffering from depression, and you give them the same medications, they're going to have potentially completely different effect on them. So as a leader of an organization, whether I have a team of 5 people or 50 people, what can I be doing? Because it sounds like an individual, like in school, they have the individual learning plans, but that becomes so incredibly labor intensive. So as you know, at some point, there's a line that says we need what's best for our people, but at the same time, we can't give all these resources. Like, how do we walk that line? What, as a leader, what should I be doing?
First of all, educate yourself, educate the team, have these kind of conversations so that what does it look like, so that we can recognize when somebody is at risk long before they ever get so ingrained in depression that it makes it difficult to treat. We want to make sure that we have resources available. So it might be an employee assistance program. It might be your HR department. It might be a connection out in the community. As a leader, you're not there to diagnose and you're not there to give advice. You're there to recognize and make connections. I would say the other piece with that then is once that person has reached out for help and once that person is getting the resources, that's when you start having the conversation of what does that look like now for the workplace? What does that look like for you being able to come back? Is it, some people, the noise bothers them if it's an anxiety, so they need a much quieter place to work. Or for other people, they need to, because of the dangerousness of the situation, maybe they're around heavy machines, they can't afford to be sleepy or not paying attention. You need to wait until that person is in a completely healthy mode and been okayed to come back to work. So you work with that person and you work with that person's doctor to make sure that it is a return to work that is going to actually work. And it's not a one and done conversation. It's something that you continually check in. I do want to go back to something that we didn't talk about, which was I use a model. Some of you may have taken a mental health first aid course. They use an acronym called ALGE. I use one called ALEC. ALEC stands for ask, listen, encourage, and check in. And so as a leader, Sanjay, you asked, what can you do? It's understanding how to have one of these supportive conversations. And so picking the right time to have the conversation and then asking, but because you're a leader and this is leader focused, you're going to identify the things that you've noticed that are different. So I might say, Sanjay, I've noticed that you've been late the last couple of days. That's not like you. What's going on? What do you want to talk about? How can I help you? And so you identify the behavior, you identify what's different, and then open up the conversation. The L is for listen, and be aware that there's going to probably be a lot of white space in that conversation, a lot of that person deciding what to say and how to say it. And what if I say the wrong thing? Are you going to now judge me in a different way? And so you're listening for what are they saying? What are they not saying? What is the emotion behind what are they saying? How have they dealt with this before? Have they ever dealt with this before? Who did they talk to? And so you're asking these questions and listening to get as much information as you can. And then the E stands for encourage. You're encouraging them to reach out to their HR department, their EAP, their doctor. Because you don't know if it's a thyroid condition, if it is maybe they're on a different kind of medication, or if it is depression. Like, you're not going to know until they reach out for that help. And then the last C is you continually check in with that person. Just like you would if Richard had a broken arm, I would say, like, you went to the doctor, did they say is it healing? Right. And so you check in with the person in the same way if somebody's dealing with a mental health issue.
So you kind of, like what you said, you open up the conversation, because obviously you can't push the conversation. You open it up and you create an environment where the person feels comfortable sharing as much as they want to.
Yeah. And so you've set that up as a culture, because, we talked about culture to begin with. But if you are talking about this, but if you're sitting there and you're making jokes about the psycho and crazy and all that kind of stuff, that person is never going to come out and talk to you. Right. So you've got to have
they'll never trust you.
Yeah. But what I like about your ALEC model is, first of all, Richard has a son named Alec, so that makes it easy for him to remember. But it's not about it's not just about work, right? That's a conversation you can have socially. You talk to a friend, and you tweak it accordingly. So it fits who you are in the relationship, because maybe it's I'm just looking at the comment in the chat box here, and it's the individual saying that they're not comfortable saying that's not like you. and you maybe not have that relationship, or if it doesn't resonate with you, then don't do it. But if it does, I mean, for some people, that's a great, that's what I'm looking for. It's a structure. It's a simple framework to follow through.
And Elizabeth, I go, you know, your comment that, so the reason I said that's not like you is because I'm pointing out that so the behavior of maybe being late for meetings or not handing reports in on time, or the quality of the work not being there, you're pointing out that this isn't, you're not always this way. And I've noticed a change. And that's what I mean by that. That's not like you, is that this is something that's different and unique. And because it's too easy for us to go, you know, how you doing? Fine, great, okay,
Yeah.
right? Like to write it off.
Yeah, yeah. Beverly, someone has asked, Lisa says, someone else asked, is the ALEC acronym on your LinkedIn page? Can we just type in what it stands for? It is, A is for
ask,
Listen, encourage, check in. You got to pay attention, Richard.
You were listening. Yeah. Okay. Ask, listen, encourage,
check in.
Encourage, learn to spell, and check in. Okay, great. We also had another question that I wanted to get to, our comment up in the chat from quite early on. Let me just go back up to it.
Well, Richard,
yeah.
You look for it, but I'm going to answer Lisa. Lisa,
okay, great.
It's not in my LinkedIn profile, but if you go to worksmartlivesmart.com under the blog section and type in supportive conversations, you'll come up with the article that has more about that in it as well.
Okay, great. So Lisa asks the question, and I definitely can relate to this. I also think sometimes people don't realize they're depressed or anxious if they've never really experienced it before. And so the person who's experiencing the depression may not even understand what it is. They just know that they don't feel like they used to or normally did. And that might be an impediment to seeking some treatment.
Absolutely. Especially we know that there is a hereditary component to depression as well. So if you have a parent, you are 2.5 times more likely to experience it yourself. So instead of a 10% rate, it's a 25% rate. So if your parents see the world and have felt the world in that way, you may just assume that this is normal and not see that it is anything different. And for some people, it creeps up. It comes on slowly. For other people, it's like a brick wall that just hits them, and you know they're into an episode of depression. So again, that's why it makes it so different for each person. There is you can't have any kind of test done. There is not a blood test. There is not an MRI. The only test that you can have is an autopsy, which really is not a good diagnostic. So yeah, Sanjay's giving me the look. Yeah. But there are some online screening tools because it really is about identifying behaviors and thought patterns. So there are some online screening tools that are really good to use to then take to your doctor. Because I think sometimes when we present in front of a doctor, first of all, we always feel rushed. We've got our 5-minute or 10-minute or 15-minute slot, and we need to get everything out all at once. And we don't know how to describe it, especially when you're in it. So if you can do the online screening tool, you can then take that and go, this is what I'm like, this is me. Like, this is, I'm not, you know, like I can put some words to it when it's more difficult. That will help as well when it comes to diagnosing.
You know, sometimes too, people kind of go, oh, you know, it's all in your head kind of type of comment, meaning they're making it up. Oh, there's no blood test. A doctor once explained it to me this way, going, if you don't sleep for a week and you get blood tests done, your blood tests are going to come back normal. And, you know, all the tests will come back normal. But if I ask you to go drive a car, it's just not a good idea. You're not functioning at a normal rate. So there is some disconnect. And although our science and our medicine has come so far, and we have these wonderful blood tests, and we have this temperature, and we have the whatever, you know, pick the bodily fluid, we still haven't got it all figured out. So,
right.
And it's on us to know. So actually, kind of slightly changing gears, I want to have a quick question, which is, what about the people that are, I'm fine, nothing wrong with me, I don't have an anger management problem, you pissed me off, I had to yell at you.
Yeah.
What do we do in those cases?
And again, you're going to see a lot of this in different cultures, whether it is the elderly or machoism, or, I mean, you can identify different groups all the way through. And so one of the things that I say, especially, so my example is generally with the elderly, because there has been this huge denial within that group and lack of education around it. So I would say something along the lines of, did you know like there's 3 million Canadians who will experience depression at some point in their lifetime? Like, that's a huge number of people. And most of them won't even know how to go and reach out for help. And these are some of the things that I know, like, you're not sleeping, you're crying, you're upset, you're sad, you can't concentrate, you can't focus, you can't make decisions. That sounds a little bit like you. I don't know. It could be some other things, but you know what? I think it's worthwhile going to see your doctor.
Yeah.
And so again, identifying what you've noticed, and then doing the encouraging part.
There's another question, Beverly, in the chat from Rob that I want to raise. He says, thank you for hosting this session, Beverly. We often talk about how leaders, supervisors, employers are advised to engage in mental health preparedness. What do you see as the individual's responsibility to the workplace, given that 2/3 don't seek support or help?
So the individual's responsibility, first, I'll start with the individual's responsibility. We all have a responsibility to do the best that we can to take care of ourselves, both physically and mentally. We know this stuff, right? Eating right, sleeping right, exercising, some of the basics. But it's hard. If you're dealing with depression, the motivation is taken away. If you have anxiety, you can't relax. And so, setting ourselves up as best as we can to have strategies in our tool belt. And so I talk about this kind of tool belt of strategies around us. Some of them deal with the situations, the challenges that we're facing. Some of them take care of ourselves, and some of them are about how we connect and support each other. And so we need a balance of those strategies in all of the things that we do. So the individual is doing the best that they can to make sure that we do these things. At a corporate level or organization level, it's making sure that we provide an environment that either addresses the sources of stress within the organization or helps to buffer that person against the sources of stress. And so an example is high demand, low control, high effort, low reward. Well, we know anybody working in either of those situations is at risk for high stress, and then it is at risk for mental health issues. So as a leader, do you have, is your team working in a situation in which there's a lot of demands, but not a lot of control over the work that they're doing? Are they in a situation, so high demand, low control, high effort, where there's a lot of output, whether it's physical or mental, and not a lot of appreciation? Well, as a leader, you have a direct impact on the appreciation, on the reward side. And so understanding that workplace wellness programs can help to give information and training and buffering, that there are things within the culture that we can do to minimize the impact of some of those sources. And then when we can't, it's looking at what can we do to support somebody who may be at risk. And so that's where our benefits packages come in, and making sure that we have places where people can go for help and assistance when they need it.
If there is 1 or 2 high-level tips based on the organizations you've worked with, and you could say, hey, overall, we'd be taking a huge step forward if organizations were doing these things, and a lot of them are not. Based on your experience, what would you recommend? What suggestion would you make?
So first, ask. What are the sources of stress, the big things, the little things, the things within the workplace, the things outside of the workplace? There is no point in an organization spending a lot of money on a smoking cessation program if only one of the people out of 100 actually smokes. So talk about it. So what are the sources of stress, big and little? What programs do you already have in place? Get really good at communicating those, because organizations have amazing programs and they're lousy about communicating those out to their teams. And so people don't know about half of them. And then find programs or presentations or strategies to support somebody who may be at risk. And that may be, like I said, an EAP. It may be bringing us in to talk about certain aspects of the culture, mental health or whatever it is, recognition to booster and buffer somebody against those sources of stress.
So the answer is always bring in a speaker.
Always bring in Beverly. I like that. That's a perfect answer, Sanjay. Awesome. Get comfortable. Get comfortable with talking about depression. Get comfortable. Know what anxiety disorders look like. Get
and take the stigma away from it. Take the stigma out of it. Yeah. Lisa asked a question, going back to your model, how often should you check in with someone that you've already had a conversation with? That's a great practical question.
Yeah, I would say, A, that depends on your position, and B, that depends on your relationship with that person. So if and whatever the action item was, so if that person was to go and reach out with their doctor, or maybe they were to, call 911. I mean, there's such a big difference.
Sure. Yeah.
So I would say, as you see, so if you see improvements, that's when you want to have a conversation. If you're not seeing an improvement, that's when you want to have a conversation.
Okay.
It's just, you don't want to force it. Like, you don't want to say like every Wednesday at 9:00, because that's not natural, right? You don't want to put more pressure on that person. However, I said that if part of the actions where that's, because this is a workplace too. So, and the person still needs to perform. So if part of the actions are that these projects, these steps need to be taken in order for that person to be successful in their job, and they're not done, then what's the follow-up? What are the consequences of that? Because going back to what you said, there may be denial. And if that person refuses to go get help, you are still, as a leader, having to make sure that you document all of these conversations, that you've offered all of these different options. You may end up at some point having to look at removing that person from the workplace.
Yeah.
Tell us a warm, fuzzy, feel good story of like this, an idea of, an organization that nipped something in the bud, or that had someone go from being at a certain low level of functioning to getting the right support, and a success story. Like nothing like throwing you on the spot.
They're really. So a warm, fuzzy story. So I guess the pandemic is part of that, right? People struggled at the beginning, especially with loneliness and not knowing how to do their jobs, and not knowing technology and that. So one of the organizations that I liked, what they did was, again, just simply having instead of, when we're together, we would have an open door policy. Right. So one of the things that they did was they just had a coffee hour, and the leader would come on, every day at this particular time, and people could come and just either hang out or just chat. And it didn't have to be, it wasn't a meeting, because there wasn't an agenda. It wasn't about this project, but it was really just about checking in. And the leader, found that person was really struggling. They were trying to homeschool at the same time, and doing homeschooling and trying to get this. The person was definitely feeling unsupported and feeling like they just didn't know where to turn. So the coffee hour, because of it being informal, allowed that person, I guess, they came on and they were just kind of at wit's end and just vented. They wouldn't necessarily had an opportunity to have that vent, and they certainly wouldn't do it in the middle of a meeting. So it allowed them to have a very much more supportive conversation. It also allowed them, the leader, to look at that and go, okay, like the morning is a write-off for this person. Like they just, with the kids at home and everything that needs to be done and the way that their family life was structured, it allowed them to really be able to problem solve and to be able to for a duration, shorten the hours and have that person work in the afternoon when things were much calmer. Somebody else could step in and those things. But it wouldn't have happened unless that person had implemented an informal coffee hour.
I love that because of the simplicity of it and the effectiveness of it. People think that, mental health, so we have to bring in a team of doctors or whatever. It's just
have a program of some kind. Yeah.
And it's simple to do. And by the way, we did something similar. What we do is, and we call it every other Wednesday, just informal chat. Come and harass each other.
So it's a therapy 45 minutes for our community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, sometimes, before it gets to that, where somebody's really struggling with a mental illness, just being able to have a conversation, just being able to look at what supports are available. And, sometimes, we look at the sandwich generation. There are a lot of people who are really worried and concerned about their parents and their parents' mental health, and, getting them the support that they need. And are they living in a nursing home? Should they be living in a nursing home? Do they need any kind of assistance? And that is not a business conversation. And so people struggle outside, but as a leader, you need to be aware of what are the things that are impacting your employees. You don't need to know all the dirty details of things.
Right.
You need to know, does this person have little kids at home? Do they have elderly parents? Are they struggling with, something that is going to impact them? And can you make connections for them? Can you give them some breathing space to be able to allow to deal with some of this stuff?
Okay, so we are starting to push up against our time clock here. I think we're just kind of scratching the surface too. But if people wanted to go deeper and understand what you do, or see how they could benefit from bringing you into their organizations, how can they get a hold of you, Beverly?
Really easy. info@worksmartlivesmart.com. So you can email me that way. You can go to the worksmartlivesmart.com website. You can get a hold of me on LinkedIn. Any of those are perfect.
Great. Okay. So looks like, Sanjay, you're typing that into, info@worksmartlivesmart.com. One last little quick comment also from Rob. When the pandemic started, kids were forced into schooling from home. Stress levels rose. Our employer provided Chromebooks, among many other things, to help mitigate that stress, which for me enabled me to keep focused on work. So yeah, great strategies, great ideas. I think it all really comes down to a culture of caring. If you have a culture of caring, you're going to look for ways to support people when in any kind of illness, whether it's a mental illness or whether it's another type of illness. And if you don't have a culture of caring, then you're not. And we all know which one is better for business.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'm kind of bummed because I wanted to get into the whole SOS model. So it just means we'll have to bring you back. So looking forward to that. Now, logistically, we're going to start wrapping this thing up. Normally, every other Wednesday would be December 29th. However,
but we have an announcement to make, a holiday announcement.
Absolutely. We're sick of you. No, sorry, you're probably sick of us. And we're gonna let people enjoy their holidays, and we're gonna reconvene January 5th, Wednesday, January 5th. And we'll take it from there. And
is that what we're doing? So we're gonna do 3 weeks from now.
4 weeks.
That'll take us off.
You do the math. January 12th. I'm not
January.
a math guy.
Let's do January 12th. Yeah, let's do January 12th. It'll be so hard to be away for almost a month, but yeah, we want to give everyone time to enjoy the holidays.
Truth is, I wanted to make sure Richard is paying attention. It is January 12th, Wednesday, January 12th. And for those who are keeping track at home, I will be clean shaven by then. So
yeah, one way or the other.
For those who celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, Kwanzaa, whatever your flavor is, happiest of New Year's. We look forward to seeing everyone on January 12th, and all the best.
Okay, thanks everyone for being here. See you almost every other Wednesday.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Beverly.